You're listening to Career Ready, and I'm Coach K. Getting you ready for your corporate career. The individual interview and assessments are actually the most common types of sessions in any interview process, not just the bursary application process. Just to summarize what we've already discussed this week, I introduced the 3 types of interviews you can expect during the bursary interview process, which were group interviews, individual interviews, and the assessments. We then covered how to prepare for the interviews, whether the interview is in person or on a video conference instead. Do you remember the 3 things you must do when preparing for your interviews? The first was researching the company and its industry. The second was practicing your answers based on the most common interview questions I provided. And the third was examining the qualifying or eligibility criteria for the bursary that you're applying for so that you can know exactly what qualities you need to highlight during the interview process. Then we looked at what additional things you need to do if you have a video interview instead. And lastly, we covered what group interviews are. What is their purpose? Why the bursary board would utilize this type of interview, but also how to conduct yourself during a group interview. Today is our last session for the week, and I will close off this week's discussion talking about the individual interviews and the assessments. We have already discussed how to prepare for interviews, but also some of the most common questions to expect. Do you remember those as well? I really hope so, because this stands true for both the group and the individual interviews. But how you conduct yourself in an individual interview is not the same as a group interview. With the individual interviews, you have nowhere to hide. This one is all about you, and you have to sustain the conversation and the engagement all by yourself. So it's extremely important that you prepare very well for this one. And here's the list again of common questions that you can expect to be asked during your individual interview as well. A, tell us about yourself. B, why should you receive this bursary? C, why do you want to study what you applied for? D, tell us about a time you successfully completed a project. E, how do you handle stress? F, what is your greatest weakness? And G, technical related questions to your relevant studies. So if you're applying for an accounting bursary, for instance, expect to be asked questions about how you would journal certain transactions. Now, how do you prepare for the individual interview at this level for your bursary? You read and read and read some more. When you applied for the bursary, you most likely applied for the field of study you want to pursue or continue pursuing if you've already started your tertiary education. This means that the panel will ask you technical or theory-based questions to get a better understanding of how much you know, are skilled in that particular subject, or have learned from your previous studies. So for instance, if you're applying for an accounting bursary, then make sure you have read through all your accounting principles again and that you have a firm understanding of the most common transactions. To keep with the accounting example, the interview panel can and will ask you specific questions related to accounting in the interview, including transactional questions. And they will expect you to tell them how you would journal those entries, whether in a general ledger, an income statement, or a balance sheet. Did you get that? Not write it down, but tell them. Talking through a problem can be difficult for some people, but they can easily write them down. So if you know that you can conceptualize a solution but have difficulty expressing the solution, then you need to practice this before your interview. Let me test that now actually. So if in the interview they ask you this question: John walks into a dealership and buys a car cash for 120,000 Rand. Please talk us through how you would journal that entry in the books of the dealership. How did you cope with that question? Did you see the answer in your mind? Could you immediately explain the entries across the general ledger and the income statement and the balance statement? Well, not so easy for some. I know it wasn't easy for me. I'm one of those people who would have needed to write out the solution and this is okay. It just means that I have to practice a little bit more than others to verbalize my answers. And there is no shame in this. Just be self-aware and work on your weaknesses while you hone on your strengths. Now let's discuss the last type of session or interview, and that is the assessment. Assessments can be anything from an interview exam to a presentation or an online psychometric and personality test. But not to worry, the written exam is usually never anything you wouldn't have come across before at this point in your studies. But it's good to know that they can request one from you, and you should be prepared mentally for this. You can go online and search for free personality and psychometric tests just to familiarize yourself with how they look so that you're not overwhelmed on the day trying to figure things out. But I will post some links to some free psychometric and personality tests on my YouTube channel accompanying this session so that you guys can have that resource as well. Otherwise, that's it from me this week on how to prepare and conduct yourself for a bursary application interview. I hope you learned some new things that you can now apply, and I hope that I have provided some tools that you can use to help you to empower your purpose. That's it from me. You are listening to Career Ready. Stay connected and continue the conversation with me either on Insta, Facebook, or YouTube at Hello Coach K. See you next time.